G'day legends, I hope you're all fantastic. We're going to do something slightly different today. I was sent a bunch of old music gear catalogs by a subscriber. Michael, thank you so much for making this happen. Basically, they wrote to me via email and said, hey, I've got a bunch of these old guitar gear catalogs that I used to collect. If you want to make a video on them, I'll send them over to you. They actually wrote me a little nice handwritten note in here, and it says, hi Leon, as discussed by email, please find some old gear catalogs and magazines. I hope they come in handy for you as you explore older gear. You couldn't get these USA catalogs in Australia unless you wrote to them, which I did for some reason. Well, Michael, 1987, 1988, whenever you started doing this, I certainly appreciate it in hindsight, because I think this is going to be super interesting to see not only the kind of classic gear that has now become vintage from them, what it cost originally, but I also want to learn about some gear that maybe people have just forgotten about. So we're going to start out with this 1987-88 guitar buyer's guide. I'm just going to open it up. I'm excited to do this. Let's have a look at what we've got on the first page. And of course, it's 1988. We've got the art proverb being advertised over here. And what is going on here? I like the pun here. Gibson is back to basics. So even 35 years ago, Gibson was talking about resetting their brand. But this thing over here, I hope you can see that. I hope there's no glare on there. The 2020 bass, I've never even heard about that. I don't know what that says about this, but a bunch of kind of Kramer-looking basses over here as well. As I go, I'm going to be reminding you all to leave a bunch of comments. If anybody ever played or owned one of these, please let me know. Yep, it's the 80s, the art proverb. I've still never tried one of those. I should try some more art stuff, shouldn't I? There he is. The king, the thunder from down under, Frank Gambale with that desert yellow Ibanez. You know, I'm pretty sure that watching like Frank's Chop Builder video made me fall in love with those Ibanez colors, and I love the color of their shirt as well. And I like that people now unironically dress like this again. So let's get into the actual guide. Steve and Billy, that's pretty cool. I like that. We've got a PV ad over here. This is pretty cool. There's a little editorial thing, you know, things to pay attention to. I may have read that earlier. It was pretty much the same thing that people have been saying for like 50 years with gear, you know. Expensive doesn't mean better, but a lot of the time it does. So what do we have over here? We got some electric guitars. This is interesting. Straight out of the gate, this American Showster. For $24.95 in 1988, you can get this original 57, which looks totally wild. If that had fan frets, that would kind of look like that Ernie Ball Music Man Kaizen thing. Well, it's equally as wild. What else do we have on here? We've got BC Rich. So a Warlock was $1,000 US back in 1988. You know, you can probably just type in like $1,000 in 1988. What does that equate to nowadays with inflation? So we got that over here. We've got Charvel. This is pretty cool. So Model 5, Model 4, Model 3, Model 1. A Model 1 was $369 and a Model 5 was $900. Same as a Model 6, but with 2 Jackson double coil configuration. Interesting, and a Model 6 is $1,000. This is wild. What on earth is this? Is this a Concorde or is this a Conklin? That is such an interesting, like it looks like a kind of profile shot of a piranha or something. Look at these things. That's wild. The 80s was wild, wasn't it? I want to see Gibson and Fender. Here we go. We've got ESP as well. So a deluxe ESP Eclipse was $1,000 US back then, and a vintage Strat was $849. A contemporary Strat was $559, and just a standard Strat, $500 in 1988. I think 1987 or 88, Fender actually moved nearly all their guitar production over to Japan for like 18 months or something, or they kind of like reset the brand. So this might be right in there. And a Squier standard Strat was $279. Well, $279 now will buy you a lot of guitar. So I wonder if it's not just like $279 $1988 would be a lot more than that. So maybe we're actually getting better quality guitars and better value guitars nowadays. So I'm just curious, like maybe let's cost up a rig over here. Let's take a look at Gibson. What is that? Genesis Nova Fire. What is that? It's a collapsible guitar. Pretty cool. Okay, here we go. Gibson. What's like a Les Paul going to cost you? In 1988. I was born in 1988 as well, so always wanted to get like an 88 Les Paul or PRS or something. So $1,238 for a 1988 Les Paul Custom in $1988. Compare that to say, a Strat, it's more expensive than a Strat. But what if we were to pair that up with, or compare it, say, to a PRS? Let's take a look. Hamer. So Chaparral Custom, $1,500. That's considerably more, I guess, well, what is it, like 10% more than a Les Paul Custom, Steve Stevens model. I had a Chaparral. I've got a Californian as well. Great guitars. You've got Kramers in here, Ibanez. Oh, did they have the RG 550 back then? What do we have over here? Hondo. Okay, they don't, but they've got the 540. So that's cheaper than a Les Paul. I'm going to use the Gibson as like the benchmark on here. Bunch of cool guitars. PRS Custom, $1,680. Okay, so that's like probably 30-ish% more than a Les Paul Custom. I feel like those prices have maybe either converged, or now like a Les Paul Custom would be 30% more than a Custom 24 or something. I do like as well that it's just the PRS Custom, nothing else in the line. And Heritage, of course, makes some really nice guitars. Let's do this. Before I go any further, there's an ad for Sean guitars. Who remembers Sean guitars? Weren't these made by Grover Jackson or something like that? That is a wild body shape on there. I don't think they lasted very long at all. Sean guitars, ladies and gentlemen, this is amazing. Those Seymour Duncan amps. Acoustic guitars, let's skip that. Let's get to amps. The Mark III. All right, what did a Boogie cost you back in the day? Let's see. Can we go into amps? All right, we've got amps over here. Maybe we'll look at like a Boogie or a Marshall or something like that. So we've got Marshall / Korg USA. Let's see. Model 2203, $1,074. And 1960 cab was $875. So you could get a head and a cab for $2,000 if you wanted a Marshall half stack. At a Les Paul Custom or something, you're around $3,300 in 1988, which I'm starting to feel is probably a lot in today's money. That's pretty interesting. What about Boogie? So we can kind of move on over here. This is pretty interesting. Like, they even had the vintage cabs back there, so different speakers. And the Jubilee was $1,150 back in 1988. That's cool. That's very cool. Here we go. A Mark III combo from Boogie, $850. That's cheaper than I thought it would be. What does it say here? Fully loaded Mark III combo with simulcast 5-band graphic EQ and an EV 12-inch retails for $1,400. Okay, let's see. Maybe the head's $850. I don't know, something like that. That's pretty reasonable. So for $3,000 back in 1988, you could probably get a pro rig. I mean, there's no pedals in here. Maybe we should skip ahead and take a look at some pedals or something like that. Pig nose. What was a pig nose back in the day? A 3060 was $270. This is interesting. I'm always curious about this stuff because nowadays I just kind of find old gear and make noises with it, and I have no perception of what that would have cost back in the day. Look, the Rockman X100 was $319. So I think now if you can find one of those used, they're probably upwards of like, $1,500. They've become very collectible. So they have probably outpaced inflation versus other pieces of gear. So let's do this. Let's take a look at, whoa, look at this stuff. We're getting into like the effects over here, are we? Awesome. That's what I want. I want effects. I want to know what like a Boss pedal was back in the day. Peavey, Rocktech, Samson, Roland. Here we go. Hopefully this isn't too glary either. So a DC2 Dimension C back in 1988 was $230. I'm fairly certain you can get the Wazacraft version for about that in today's money. So definitely more bang for your buck these days. Oh, look at this. They've even got their rack processors. The GP8 was $1,000, almost as much as a Les Paul Custom. So what does a Les Paul Custom cost you now? Like $3, $4, $5,000 if you want to buy one new. That's absolutely crazy. The DEP3, got the DEP5, which I love. Are these the little half rack units? Yes. They were like varying prices, it looks like it. So a DS1 was $1980 in 1988. It wasn't $1988. It was $100, if I'm reading that correctly. Yeah, so $100 nowadays will buy you a lot of different things. And that was just a simple old little DS1. So again, we're kind of like ahead of the curve there. The Rockman stuff, the Stereo Echo, $250. The Stereo Chorus, $270. I mean, they're not that much more than a simple Boss pedal, are they? That's pretty amazing. Yamaha. Ooh, are they going to have some SPX series stuff in here? Look at this. The SPX 90. It doesn't list the price, but it lists the price for the wireless, which was $1,000. It's a shame that that is not in there. Look at all this rack stuff. Oh, they got the TC Electronics. The 1210 in 1988 was $1,000. So that's pretty expensive. Again, that's more than a brand new Strat. Do they have that 2290 in here? SCF was $369. This is a gold mine. This is amazing. The 1140 parametric EQ. So there's, oh, here we go. Okay. In 1988, the 2290 was $2,000 US. And that kind of puts it in perspective for me where you see them go for around that price used now. And that seems like a crazy price. But adjusted for inflation, I got to find this out. I got to know what that was. Okay, so that's about $3,000 US in today's money. So maybe some of this old vintage rack gear is actually secretly a good deal. This is amazing. Michael, thank you so much for this. And look at this. There's a whole section on parts, pickups, and accessories. I love these old PRS ads. Absolutely love that. So what was like a, I don't know, a Seymour Duncan or a Damasio? Let's do the Damasio back in the day. Damasio, I love that they had something called a Mega Drive, but just a PAF was $80 from Damasio. Or what was a Super Distortion? Where is that one going to be? I think there was probably like a model number on there, $84, and you could get a Super Distortion. So I guess you kind of have to add about 50% to the price with inflation. I'm glad I've got that. I probably should have done that at the start of the video. So yeah, it's interesting seeing how some gear has kind of gone down in relative costs once you count in inflation, and other stuff totally hasn't, like Les Paul Customs and PRSs. They are probably way more expensive to make, and they are definitely way more expensive to buy. So some interesting stuff in there. Let's move along. Let's go to, I don't know, let's do something slightly different. Let's go to the mid-90s. Next up, let's do this 93, 94 guitar buyer's guide. We got Eddie on the cover with the Wolfie and the 5150. This is going to be a good time. So let's take a look at this straight off and add for the, well, these are PRS EG bolt-ons. That's pretty cool. The Gibson Nighthawk. I had these old Gibson catalogs as a kid where they had the Nighthawk, and then I always loved the way it looked. I didn't realize they were so petite compared to, say, like a standard Les Paul. We're getting some different brands in here. Hughes and Kettner. Here we go. This is pretty cool. The Axe Museum. What is going on in here? I think this is actually like an interview with Eddie Van Halen. This is interesting in itself. I'm going to read out a little thing over here. He opens an age-brown case and pulls out a gorgeous 1958 Gibson Flying V Carina Wood, serial number 582849. I've actually used this to record quite a bit, he explained. I played it on Hot for Teacher and Top of the World from the last album. Didn't know that. I don't know if that's even true, because I feel like Eddie would often throw out these kind of red herrings with gear, but there's some nice old gear in there. Some kind of wild looking stuff there as well. There's an ad for Tom Anderson. Let's get onto the actual gear guide. I love these old Paul Gilbert, Mr. Big ads as well. I said the gear guy. I'm the gear guy. We're looking at the gear guide over here. So what do we have? Oh, check this out. Check this out. What is that? The Korg G3 with Dimebag on there. That's pretty cool. You're getting the Sans amp in there. I feel like stuff has moved away from the racks over here. And, you know, just Jimmy Page chugging a durry in a magazine. You wouldn't be able to get away with that anymore. I don't know. Maybe that's for the best as well. Alrighty, let's have a look. This is what, 1994. What do we have over here? Alvarez, Tom Anderson. I want to take a look at the baseline price for a Les Paul Custom before we go any further with this. All these brands, there's so many that I've just never heard of, like Farnell, Everett, Erlewine. Well, I know who Dan Erlewine is. Kind of like the godfather of guitar technicians. Let's get on to Gibson over here. Here we go. What do we have? We've got Les Paul reissue. Wow. What has gone on here? LPR Les Paul reissue. I'm guessing this is kind of like maybe the start of their historic series or something like that. $5,000. Les Paul Studio, Les Paul Standard, Classic, Classic Plus, Custom. So Custom was $2,199. So that's gone up by nearly $1,000 in 5 or 6 years. So you can see the kind of gear inflationary syndrome has definitely kicked in at this stage. That's definitely above inflation. What did I calculate before? Like if you took $1988 and added 50%, you'd have $22. And I don't know how accurate that is. I did like one Google search, but you can see already there the like the relative value has gone up a lot on there. Dan Huff, the man, the Huff, don't hassle the Huff. So that's pretty interesting. What else? Let's maybe take a look at like the PRS stuff. I'm going to try to just look for a few different things over here. We have Hondo, Honor, Jackson USA, Ibanez, the Voyager series. That was a Red Beach guitar. That was the RBM2 was $2,200 in 1994. That is, I mean, that's a guitar, isn't it? Very, very interesting looking guitar. Paul Reed Smith. We got some different models in here for the PRS stuff. So what does a PRS custom $2,040. I find that really, really interesting. In 1988, a PRS custom was like 30% more expensive than a Les Paul custom. Now it is about 10% cheaper than a Les Paul custom. So very, very interesting seeing that price creep. I do like that there's a whole section in here for hexaphonic guitars. I imagine there's like lots and lots of those. Yeah, it's not a very big selection in there. You've got sort of fun stuff like Ricky's, a Pensasur. So Pensasur carved top Mark Knopfler model, $4,000. Let's take a look at some effects now, or maybe some amps through here, just while we're taking a look at this. I find that really interesting to see over the course of 5 or 6 years how much the price seemed to increase on guitar gear there. So you got amplifiers. Let's use our Marshall as a kind of, you know, reference point over here. What do we have? Well, we got the 30th anniversary. So $2,000 for the 30th anniversary head. You got the JCM 900. So I guess like the relative price hadn't gone up that much. A 4100 100 watt head is $1,299. Not that much more expensive than a 2203 was in 1988. So Marshall were keeping it real back then. And look at this. You got the 9200, 9100 power amp and the 9004 preamp in there, and then their reissues. This is pretty cool. So the JMP1 Valve MIDI preamp was $1,000 in 1994. Boogie. I want to see what the Boogie prices were like. So what do we have? This is 94. So yeah, the Mark IV is out. They don't have a price listed. Well, this is totally useless. I wanted to know what the price of a Mark IV was in 1994. Did you buy a Mark IV in 1994? Let me know what you paid for it in the comment section below. PV, the Rockmaster, there's one sitting back here. That was only $350 in 1994. So way less than half the price of something like a JMP1. It wasn't programmable though, I guess that. An original 5150 was $900. That's pretty cool. They definitely would be worth a lot more in relative dollars. Rivera, there's some pretty cool stuff. Rocktron, wow, the Rocktron Utopia system, $6,300. Oh boy, we got Roland, we've got, do they have the IntelliFX in here? That would be interesting. It doesn't seem to be in here. Maybe that's going to be in effects. Let's go to effects. Alrighty, flicking through here, we got basses, we've got effects over here. Check this out. What do we have over here? We got Digitech, we got DOD, Chandler, Demeter. There's some cool stuff in here. It's interesting as well going from this like glossy, look at this, the Boss stuff is on glossy paper, but the other effects are on just normal paper. I wonder if that influenced any buying decisions back in the day. The Boss SE70, I recently did a review video on one of these. I think I paid $180 for it from Japan. That's Australian dollars. That's probably about 120 US dollars. The SE70 was $850 in 1994. I mean, if you took $850 US dollars now, you could buy an Eventide H90 or almost buy a Fractal FM3. And I get it that these things, you know, kind of like as tech gets more powerful, it gets cheaper as well. But that is wild. Let's see what they've got. What an SD1 cost you? $90 in 1994. I feel like maybe they've hovered around the same price forever on there. You've got the AutoWire, you've got the CE5, the Hyperfuzz, the Turbo Overdrive, the HM3. What else did Boss have in their lineup back then? Bass Chorus, digital pitch shifter, $200. I mean, it's interesting that there's no $400 reverb pedals here. You've either got rack stuff that's like $800 up, or you've got pedals that are less than $200. That's pretty interesting. The DoD stuff is, wow, okay, check this out. So the DoD stuff, like the classic fuzz, it's all cheaper than the Boss stuff from the looks of things over here. Dunlop is in here. The Ensoniq DP4, that's one unit. I actually bought one of those recently on Reverb, and it arrived and it wasn't working, and I was devastated because I really, really want to try it. Here we go, kids. Eventide. Look at this. In 1994, an H3500 was $3,495. The DSP 4000 was about $5,000, and the Steve Vai version of the Ultra Harmonizer, the H3000, was $2,500. So, I mean, look, anyone who complains about the price of an Axe-Fx or something like that, what does an Axe-Fx cost in US dollars nowadays? Like probably a little bit less than that, and it does probably everything that is listed in this entire magazine. So I feel like in general from these first two magazines, we're getting a pretty good deal when it comes to gear these days. Like, we probably are living in this golden age of guitar gear. A few more fun ones just because I'm interested in this kind of gear. Our Lexicon PCM 70 in 1994 was like $25.49, nearly $2,600. You've got Matchless over here. That's pretty interesting. What other effects brands do we have over here? Rocktron. All right, the Intel-FX was $1,200, so half the price of an Eventide H3000 in there. They've got a bunch of other kind of fun stuff in here. You got Roger Mayer, got Roland. So I guess this was kind of like Roland's last crack at serious rack stuff. The SRV 330 and the 330 Dimensional Space Delay were all around that kind of Intel-FX price, and you've still got Rockman being made in 1994, which I didn't realize, but the Rockman stuff probably went under like early 90s. Your 2290 was still, wow, nearly $3,000. That has all gone up a little bit, hasn't it? But the good old SCF is still around the $300, $400 mark. So even back then, the TC and the Eventide stuff was premium. They have still pursued those premium price models on there. Yamaha has a bunch of stuff in here. The FX500, the half rack space, that's the slow dive effect unit for anyone out there. And Zoom, good old Zoom. Do they have the, I don't know, when did the 707 come out? Doesn't look like it. So the Zoom 9000-ish series in here. I've done a video with the 9030, wow, which was $750 back in the day. That's quite a lot of money compared to other stuff. Okay, let's maybe skip forward in time a few more years. So this is a catalog for Thoroughbred music. So there's an actual store on here, and they are from, it says Central Florida. Okay, so this is 1997-98. This is their winter catalog. And straight out of the bat, we got some Zoom stuff over here. Yes. Well, my first pedal was a Zoom 707. So I started playing guitar in about 2001, 2002. So we're kind of getting closer to me starting to play guitar in here. What was the good old 505? It was $120. That's a bargain. That's like around the price of a Boss compact pedal. And you get all that stuff in there. And, you know, when you're starting out, sometimes all you want is the stuff. Let's move on. Oh, yes, Boss pedals. What could you buy from Boss in 1997 over here? You've got the AC2. That would have been a pretty hip unit at the time. Got their octave pedal, TR2, the harmonist, the colors on all of this. I don't know if it's a printing or something like that, but they kind of seem off. So the Metal Zone was $100. You know, if you just wanted to have that sound, that feels pretty accessible back then. The Blues Driver was $80. The where's the SD1? Where is the SD1? I can't see the SD1. I feel like I'm having a crisis over here. You got Tube Screamers over here. So the TS9 was $120, whereas the Sound Tank TS5 was $40. Why would you buy a TS9? Why wouldn't you just buy the TS5 and rehouse it or something like that? That's a bit of a bargain, $40. You can kind of see here the late 90s, you're starting to get all this stuff actually kind of coming down in price in relative value, which is interesting. So you can get a Boss OD3 for $86 from this store, which is more expensive than a Rat, and around the same price as a Boss Flanger. So I just find this endlessly fascinating. And if you've watched this far, hopefully you find it endlessly fascinating as well. The DoD stuff is all around the $60, $70 mark in here. Wow, look at these multi-effects in here. Oh, the Digitech multi-effects. The RP12 on the floor. So I think they kind of got out of their rack effects processors, although there is a DoD rack unit over here for $250. This is probably more interesting, right? Because it's actual street prices on gear, not the list prices like the other mags we looked at. Got some SansAmp stuff in here. So the bass driver was $170. Ryan uses that same pedal today as his bass rig for ragdoll gigs, and that's definitely a piece of gear that has stood the test of time. Bunch of Roland stuff. This is cool. My dad still has a Roland VG8, and I remember back in the day him saying he spent a bomb on it. So if you wanted a VG8 in American dollars in 1988, it was $1,300, and then the GK pickup was another $220, and you had expansion cards for around $160, $100, stuff like that. That's a lot, isn't it? Especially now, you know, what do they do? The SY1000. I feel like, again, with any of this sort of tech, it's definitely come down in price. And just in time, Gibson prices. Let's take a look at what we've got over here. You got some Dean stuff over here, which is pretty cool. But the main show, what do we have here? A Les Paul Custom. Does it list prices over here? Maybe they don't list the prices. I'll be devastated if they don't do that. There's just a reference number on here. Again, kind of like the Boogie stuff. I feel like this is some kind of conspiracy. They list prices for like t-shirts and caps, but not for the actual guitars. So it's a shame we don't have that kind of reference point over there. Although an Epiphone Les Paul Custom was $500. Alrighty, let's move along. What do we have in here? We got the Ibanez Universe, list at $2,100. That kind of seems about right for the mid to late 90s. Acoustic guitars, whole bunch of stuff in here. What else do we have? I think we're just going to get into the weeds with like straps and instructional books and videos, guitar and bass amps. So 1988, what was a 2203? Like 1,200-ish bucks, something like that. You could get a JCM 900 SLX for $800. So like 100-watt head. The price has come down. That's kind of exciting. Whoa, I did not realize that the DSL series came out in 97, 98. Of course they did. So a DSL 100, basically when it came out, was the same price as a 2203 in 1988. Marshall have done well. They've kind of brought the overall price down on that. That is an all-time classic amp. That's so awesome. And is this a JCM 600? Has anybody out there actually tried a JCM 600? That is so interesting. You got the Slash signature head, the mini amp, some Park amps in there. Look at this. Look at what is starting to creep in, ladies and gentlemen. You got the Line 6 Axis and the Flex Tone. Early trailblazing modeling products. What were they? So a Flex Tone, it says list for $800. I guess it's an all-in-one amp that does a bunch of sounds. It's around the same price as a Marshall head with the speakers built in. That's got to be pretty good. And then we are on to, wow, what are these? What are these? Ensoniq. Okay, this looks like pro audio stuff. Mixers. I don't think many people are going to be interested in this. We've got some rack gear. Signal processors. We've got the Alesis gear. So a MIDI-Verb 4 was what? $300? This stuff is starting to come down in price, right? The Digitech Studio 400, $700. A Studio Quad. I've done a video with that. That is pretty cool. $440. This was, you know, I guess relatively affordable back in the day. Whoa. Here we go. Here we go. The TC Fireworks, $1,700. A GeForce, $1,400. PCM 80 and 90 from Lexicon, $2,000. So there's your like modern Axe-Fx price point on here. We definitely have it very, very good. Even the MPX-1 was $1,000 in 1998. Wow. Those things are an absolute steal nowadays if you can get them secondhand. What else do we have in this catalog? So I'm going to jump over to another one once I get through this one. We've got lighting, we've got books, we've got all sorts of stuff. Yamaha keyboards. I think I'm going to swap over. Drum modules, cymbals. Apologies to all the drummers out there, and I bet you there's like order forms at the end of this. There certainly is. You can just mail it in. That's cool. All right, we're going to go to Australia next. And I actually had this catalog back in the day. I was playing guitar at the time. Got it from a music store. Pro Audio. So the Gambale family owned Pro Audio. So this is pretty interesting. There's the connection with the very, very start of this. So talking 2005 in Australia, I remember the Aussie dollar really being weak against the US dollar. So this is around the time I was like getting into gear, right? So great example, a Gem 7V, 5,000 Australian dollars. It says call for price. So you're still going to be paying, you know, some vital organ or something like that. This is interesting. PRS Custom 24 in Australia, $4,700. The McCartys were $4,500. They're probably around the same price now. You could probably pick one up for, or, you know, in Aussie dollars anyway. At the moment, that doesn't seem that crazy. I think those prices have been pretty stable. But we got to use our reference point, right? A Gibson Les Paul Custom. Oh boy. Here we go. What do we have over here? The Les Paul Studio Plus, the classic. Les Paul Custom in 2005, $4,800. So I don't know what they cost now. They're definitely more than that in 2022 dollars. You know, we're talking 17 years later. But I feel like maybe my perception that Gibson have jacked up their prices massively recently isn't really true. It feels like between 1988 and 1994, they massively jacked up their prices and sort of like outpaced inflation, but then they've kind of stabilized. So I don't know, let me know your thoughts. Is stuff actually like kind of cheaper now or better or worse value? I'm very curious to hear. There are a cool few guitars though. I've been talking about the prices a lot on this, but there's some cool stuff. Like we've lost all the cool 80s stuff, but I do remember in this era seeing, like, do they have a bunch of the other Gibson guitars? They don't. But like having the, what was it? The Studio Plus, the classic. I feel like there was a bunch of guitars like the Standard Premium Plus around this time. Maybe they stopped making those. Fenders are interesting. I remember this is kind of around the time checking out music stores where it's like Fender, yeah, the Highway 1, that came out. That was very, very cool. And you could get like really cool looking, the Deluxe Players Strat. These are priced pretty well, you know, compared to other stuff. The American Deluxes, one of my friends has an American Deluxe Telly from around then, and it is a great guitar. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Half-size guitars, you got Greg Bennett Samick, you got acoustics. Let's go for the Boss pedals. This is the reference point for me. Oh, remember those Marshall pedals? They were cool. I always wanted one of those. And the Digitex that no one wanted until, you know, Josh Scott did a video on them recently. So this is me going to a music store and looking at the price of stuff. These are the prices I remember. A Super Overdrive, 130 Australian dollars, whereas a Metal Zone was $230. So it must be $100 better, right? A DD3 was $300, but a DD6 was $400 in Australian dollars. Do they have the twin pedals out at this stage? They don't have them listed in here, but you can see the loop station over there was nearly $600. Wow. We got Electro Harmonics, we've got Dunlop. Yeah, like a Tube Screamer, $280, brand new, which again, compared to an SD1, it's like, why wouldn't you buy like two SD1s for that money? I don't know, the clipping's different, but you get what I mean. Here we go. Marshalls. And I want to show you the insane prices on boogies as well. So I feel like the Marshall stuff was pretty accessible. They had the Mode 4 out at the time. Here we go. So this was what I used to lust over all the time. We got the TSLs. And do we have the DSL still? We got the MGs. We got Line 6. All right. Those prices don't seem that ridiculous for Marshall stuff. But the boogie stuff I always remember being super expensive here. So just out of curiosity, if you wanted to buy a dual rectifier, here we go. $45.95 in 2005, and a triple recto was $5,200 new. That is a chunk of change. That is a chunk of change, and that's just the head. The cabinets were pricey as well. You had the Lone Star coming out at this time. I feel like we're into modern gear at the moment. Like, this all looks and feels familiar. What was a Triaxis? $48.95. Wow. No wonder why I used to lust over them so much. They had the Rector recording preamp. They had the 290. So if you wanted, I remember kind of the rig at the time was like, if you had the rig, you had a Triaxis, you had a 290, and you had like a TC GeForce. And that's, I mean, a 290 is $4,000. And I mean, you're talking like 15 grand in rig, which is not counting the guitars either. And this is Australian dollars at the time. So like I said, the dollar was not great at the time. Definitely wouldn't have been that much in American dollars. I remember this catalog. I remember looking at the keyboards and, you know, what did they have out? Like the Roland Phantom or something like that at the time. And the Nord stuff. And, you know, they got a bunch of stuff in here that I didn't understand at the time, and I probably still don't. Let's see, do they have rack effects in here? I wonder if they have the GeForce listed. So I'd love to know what that would have cost back in the day. Behringer, you can see, has come out in full force at this time. TC Electronic M1. Interesting. Lexicon. Oh, there you go. An MPX1 was 1,300 Australian dollars, still in 2005. So, I mean, 2005 is the year the first Axe Effects came out, right? And you had, what were Line 6 on when it came to like the pod? We got mics back here. Got a bunch of other stuff. It's pretty cool. This is a trip down memory lane, this one. Memory. I can't talk. I've been talking too long. Memory lane. Yeah. And just wondering what stuff did. Like, why did you need... Like, what did these mixers do? And I didn't understand any of this stuff at the time. TC had the G system, which is $3,000. Wow. Crowd the Hotcake. I remember these Minoric guitars. We did a show in the States where someone was using those. Oh, wow. Look, the Moog MF101. You would not get those for those prices anymore. They are so much more expensive now. This is pretty amazing. There's a bunch of other really fun stuff over here. Like there are some kind of product catalogs as well. Like the Boss SX700. Let's see what marketing spiel was like back in the day. No stress editing. Of course. The screen's this big. It's no stress. I really should try the SX700. I've seen them pop up for pretty good prices. Speak of the devil, the TC GeForce. Look at this ad. Oh, this is cool. This appeals to me a lot. TC Electronics proprietary? Yeah, that's how you say that. Dark chip. This is wicked. Roland GP100, and there's a little catalog for it. This is a gold mine. Michael, I do have to say thank you so much for sending me these catalogs. What do we have? Yamaha stuff. This has some cool stuff in it, doesn't it? Guitar to MIDI. There's a... Before I go, I do need to do this. Roland product catalog for 1997. What did they bring out? The acoustic sim, the fuzz, got the GR30 guitar synth, bunch of sound modules over here. V-drums make an appearance. This would have been brand new. Wow. This is crazy. Well, they have the JP8000. So a bunch of their organs. This feels pretty chunky. Yeah, so drum sound modules for triggers. Where's the guitar stuff? Here we go. Check this out. So the GR30. So I imagine they took some of the kind of VG8 stuff out and plugged it into a little box like this that you use with the GK. An arpeggiator, synth harmonist. I kind of like that. That's a nice compact little box, isn't it? This is cool. Acoustic amps were a pretty big thing at the time. Now we just have FRFRs. This is cool. Look at this, the acoustic sim, these tuners, the trem. This is a beautiful thing. This is an absolute trip down memory lane. They're metronomes and acoustic sims. What's this? This is a MIDI controller ad. This has been pretty fun. Thanks so much for putting up with me absolutely rambling my way through these old catalogs. If you want to see more like this, let me know. And shout out to Michael Nielsen at Big Hairy Guitars, because they've done the Vintage Guitar Magazine walkthrough, which are great videos if you want to check them out. They're far more entertaining than me kind of going through, ooh, look at this. Ooh, look at this. Highly recommend that. Michael, thank you so much for sending me all these magazines. If you people out there have any stuff like this you want me to do a similar video with, feel free to send it to me. You can just write to me here or on my Discord. You can support the channel by clicking some of the links in the video description as well. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Proprietary?